lovelies, welcome back to the Geek Suite. I'm your host, the Kidner Bean, and today we're back for part 2 of our examination of Daenerys Targaryen for our series Dungeons & Dragons and Ice and Fire. And I know I said for this series that we were going to be mostly doing voiceover work with a lot of visual aids and clips and things like that, but I don't know, it just felt rude to not say hi to you guys in person, so hello! Be sure to hit like and subscribe if you like what you see on our channel. Ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our content, and be sure to follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and if you want to support more content like this, check out our Patreon page, links in the description down below. And of course, I wanted to show off my sweet dragon ear cuffs since we're doing a Dany video. Can't let you guys miss out on that. Okay. For serious now. Let's get into it. Alrighty, my lovelies. Like I said, today we're continuing with part 2 of our Daenerys Targaryen examination for our Game of Thrones, Dungeons & Dragons, and Ice and Fire series. So, once again, this is going to be an all-encompassing spoiler warning for both the books and the show, including but not limited to things like bonus features, extended universe works for George R. R. Martin, like The World of Ice and Fire, and the newest book he released, Fire and Blood, the Targaryen history, as well as pre-release chapters for the Winds of Winter. And just a quick recap of what we covered last time. On part 1 of Daenerys' D&D 5e character sheet breakdown, we established her as a human paladin with a series of characteristics that are going to be shown up on the screen right here, things with her strength, agility, and skills. And so for part 2, we're going to be examining the book version of Daenerys Targaryen as she's presented by George R. R. Martin. So, looking at that, we're going to go through how Dany is portrayed in the books, and then we'll see how the two compare at the end. Now, something that's important to note, as I'm sure you guys all know being book readers, is that George R. R. Martin's characters undergo a lot of growth over the course of their stories. So, rather than choosing a single focal point to do their analysis from somewhere in their story arc, I'm going to try to average it out by focusing on the essence of their character that perseveres throughout the Song of Ice and Fire. Now, the easiest place, again, to start when looking at Dany in the books is going to be race. Because, much like in Dungeons & Dragons and D&D, the character's race does not change throughout the course of the story. For her HBO counterpart, this was easy. Dany is human. In the books, however, the Valyrians are supposed to be more than human. Looking at the Ice and Fire wiki, we see the following description for the Valyrian people. The Valyrians are known for their great beauty and possessed physical features not seen among other peoples of the world, at least not commonly. Typically, they were very fair-skinned with silver, or platinum blonde, hair and violet or deep blue eyes. To keep their bloodlines pure, by which they retain these features, Valyrian noble families often practiced heavily incestuous marriages, wedding brother to sister, cousin to cousin, uncle to niece, and aunt to nephew. Aegon the Conqueror took this a step further and married both of his sisters, Visenya and Rhaenys. The World of Ice and Fire sourcebook explained that although such practice was not the norm among Valyrians, it was not unheard of either. So polygamy must have existed in some form with the Dragon Lord families. So as we've seen with the Targaryens and the Valyrians, they are the blood of the dragon, which, up until the release of The World of Ice and Fire, was mostly considered to be a figure of speech. For more information on dragons and genetics, check out Preston Jacobs' channel. The link will be in the description section down below. After learning about the Isle of Tears in Sothorios and their genetic experimentation with chimeras, it is more likely that the Valyrians are actually some sort of hybrid species. And we see from the World of Ice and Fire and the Ice and Fire wiki this following description of this Isle of Tears. Gogossos, once known as Gorgai, is a ruined city on the Isle of Tears, the largest of the Basilisk Isles. It lies on the southern coast of the island, facing the continent of Sothorios. The old empire of Geese founded the city under the name of Gorgai. The Giscari held Gorgai for between 2 and 4 centuries until the Valyrian freehold captured it during the Third Giscari War and renamed it Gossos. The Dragon Lords used it as a penal colony for the worst criminals. New methods of torture were used, and blood magic is said to have been practiced, including slave women being forced to mate with beasts to produce twisted, half-human offspring. Okay, and listening to that description, which, if we were dealing with the extended world and including the Guildmaster's Guide to Ravenica, Dany, as the blood of old Valyria, would best be classified as a Simic hybrid or a Simic combine. The Simic combine uses magic to transfer traits of animals into humans, elves, and Vedalken. This sounds like exactly what was going on, or at least attempted by, the Valyrians on the Isle of Tears. However, I want to avoid straying to the edges of the D&D universe to keep things as succinct as possible, especially when dealing with something as complex and deeply built into as the world of Ice and Fire in George R. R. Martin's universe. Now, looking at Dany's Blood of the Dragon, I think the most appropriate traditional D&D race to assign the Valyrians, or at least for the Dragon Lords, is Dragonborn. Now, before everyone gets all up in arms about Dany not having scales or looking like the classic descriptions of the D&D race, let me explain. The D&D description of Dragonborn is as follows. Born of dragons, as their name proclaims, the Dragonborn walk proudly through a world that greets them with fearful incomprehension. Shaped by draconic gods or the dragons themselves, the Dragonborn originally hatched from dragon eggs as a unique race, combining the best attributes of dragons and humanoids. Dragonborn look very much like dragons standing erect in human form, though they lack wings or a tail. The first Dragonborn had scales of vibrant hues matching the colors of their dragon kin, but generations of interbreeding have created a more uniform appearance. Their small, fine scales are usually brass or bronze in color, sometimes ranging to scarlet, rust, gold, or copper green. This is very much in line with how the Valyrian people are described throughout the series. Daenerys calls herself the dragon's daughter, and the Valyrians, Dany included, walked through the world thinking that this made them better than ordinary men. And after the Valyrian conquest that set up the Valyrian Empire, Aegon's conquest of Westeros, and Dany's actions in Essos after hatching of her dragons, people looked on in fear and awe, like the Dragonborn of D&D. The Valyrians, like the Dragonborn, have a signature uniform look, white hair, purple eyes, etc., as a result of generations of interbreeding and inbreeding to keep the bloodlines pure. Now, looking at the physical description of Dragonborn and the history of House Targaryen, we do see evidence that Dany may have more than just the cultural ties to this race. The Valyrians, through genetic experimentation on the Isle of Tears, aka Essosi Gitmo, are born of dragons, in a sense. And this is evident by the many miscarriages of Targaryen children throughout the years. Maegor I had a bunch. He had an eyeless monstrosity from Alice Haraway, Eleanor Costaigne, and Jane Westerling. Aegon II had a twisted, malformed stillborn with a hole in her chest and a stubby, scaled tail from Rhaenyra Targaryen. Aegon IV had some stillborns. Daemon Targaryen had a twisted and deformed son to Lyanna, and Dany's own Rhaego was a twisted monstrosity, as claimed by Mary Masdor. And these quote-unquote twisted monstrosities are Targaryens who are dragonborn that possess more of the traditional D&D characteristics, and as such do not survive past infancy for some reason. And we see an example of this description of a more traditionally dragonborn Targaryen baby when looking at Dany chapter 9 from A Game of Thrones. The child was monstrous, Mary Masdor finished for him. Twisted. I drew him forth myself. He was scaled like a lizard, blind, with the stub of a tail and small weather wings like the wings of a bat. Given this information about Targaryen or Valyrian genetic engineering with dragons and the miscarried dragonborn-like infants throughout their bloodline, I feel pretty safe in selecting Dragonborn as Dany's race in the books for our character breakdown. For her class, we're going to classify her as a sorcerer. Looking at the description of sorcerer in D&D, magic is a part of every sorcerer, suffusing body, mind, and spirit with a latent power that waits to be tapped. Some sorcerers wield magic that springs from an ancient bloodline infused with the magic of dragons. Others carry a raw, uncontrolled magic within them, a chaotic storm that manifests in unexpected ways. And this last part is where we see her class come in. George R. R. Martin makes it a point to specify that Dany isn't fireproof in the books, and he made this to be a very specific point, especially after the Hatching of Dragons came out on the HBO series, and again when D&D, the show creators, took her to be fireproof later on in the seasons. But George R. R. Martin wants it to be very specific that she's not fireproof in the books, and he states that her surviving Drogo's pyre was a fantastic magical event. And it is largely accepted by readers that Dany likely used her uncontrolled, unknown magic to hijack whatever spell Mirri Maz Duur was saying to save her own life. We also see her magic begin to unfold in other ways as her story progresses. She has dragon dreams, which are meant to mirror the Starks and their wolf dreams as a magical awakening. After her dragon dreams, she is able to get over physical pain, to take actions she normally wouldn't, and it drives her character forward on her journey as a conqueror. There are many great YouTube videos out there that discuss how Dany's story is likely going to be about rediscovering this Targaryen/Valyrian magic, and how her going through the world not knowing how to use magic is going to be dangerous. Which means, if we're going with levels, she's probably going to be like a level 1 sorcerer. More links on those type of videos about how Dany not going through magical training is going to be dangerous are going to be in the comment section down below. For her background, again, this one is kind of obvious. She was born and raised and treated, for the most part, as a princess of Westeros, albeit an exiled one, but a princess nonetheless. And just like in her show, she goes from being a princess to a Khaleesi to a queen, and maybe, we haven't seen yet, but she may, like her counterpart in the show, go on to be a conqueror. She's often referred to as Aegon with teats repeatedly throughout the books, so she's already getting this conqueror-type reputation. So again, I can't really think of a better background from Dungeons & Dragons to give her than that of the noble. And again, if you guys got something better, let me know in the comment section down below. As far as alignment goes, most online sources agree that Daenerys is chaotic good, and I'm inclined to agree. At first, her notable actions are things that are done out of righteousness or self-preservation, but they become more extreme farther down the chaotic side of good. It starts with mild things, like freeing Mirri Maz Duur, and then later burning her for her betrayal. She then turns to things like burning the warlocks of Qarth, who tried to kidnap her and her dragons. She then moves on to the slaves of Astapor, Yunkai, and Meereen. She crucifies the masters of Meereen as retribution for killing slave children to leave them as mile markers. And then sort of on the other side of this, she chains up her dragons when they begin eating children. But she isn't afraid to keep children hostage as her cupbearers, or allow her vizier, the Shavepate, to torture families to get information to stop the heartbeat killings once she's Queen of Meereen. It's going to be interesting to see what actions she will take in The Winds of Winter and A Dream of Spring, given what we've seen from the show ending. Now, looking at the information we've got so far, as a dragonborn sorcerer who is chaotic good and has a noble background, we're going to select the following skill proficiencies for her. History. As a noble with ties to Old Valyria, this is going to be an important part of her character. Deception, and this is going to be evident by her exchange with the sellsword armies of Yunkai. It is true that I am only a young girl and do not know of the ways of war. Explain to me how you propose to defeat 10,000 unsullied with your 500. Innocent as I am, these odds seem poor to me. We also see Hisdar Zolorak mention in A Dance with Dragons that she makes this similar claim, being a young girl with no experience, during one of his marriage proposals to her. Another proficiency that we're going to give her is going to be Insight, as her brother trained her in battle strategy and conquest. This is going to be a skill that she uses to get to where she is. And Persuasion. Again, sometimes she uses her beauty and charm instead of her dragons to get stuff. Alright, now that we've gotten things like our basics for raised class, alignment, and such out of the way, let's see how her character skills break down. Now, again, we're going to be doing a sort of blending of D&D metrics to see where these various skills and abilities level out for George R. R. Martin's Daenerys Targaryen. And by blending, we're going to be using these skill rankings of 10 being average, 14 to 16 being high, and 18 plus being supernaturally high. And we're going to be using evidence from the books to sort of figure out where Dany would fall on any one of these skill sets. Now, in our part 1, we had mentioned that the 18 and plus would be reserved for supernaturally powerful beings, which we had mentioned would be people like the Night King, the dragons, and Bran. However, in A Song of Ice and Fire, these would be people like the Others, the Children of the Forest, at least back in the day. Unicorns that are mentioned to exist, I would assume that they would be supernaturally powerful. The dragons, and I'm going to include Varamir Sixskins. Let me know in the comment section down below if you think he would be powerful enough to be one of these supernaturally charged people on a D&D 5e sheet. And the Stark children, whom George R. R. Martin has confirmed are all wargs. Dany may also fall into this category for certain things, as she does exhibit some extraordinary skills and magics, like this Targaryen resistance to heat, another reason that we went Dragonborn. The water was scalding hot, but Daenerys did not flinch or cry out. She liked the heat. Besides, her brother had often told her that it was never too hot for a Targaryen. Alright, so now that we reviewed these abilities as being utilized for our Song of Ice and Fire character sheet, let's see how Dany pans out. Alright, for her strength, we're going to put that in at an 8 again. We don't see any evidence that she's physically weak or any weaker than the average person, but she is petite, as people often comment on her short stature throughout A Song of Ice and Fire. She was trained in battle strategy, but not in combat, so we don't expect any significant physical strength from her. So taking her build into account, let's go ahead and put her in at an 8. A little below average, which is, what we would expect from someone of her background. Alright, moving on to the next category, we have dexterity. Now again, Dany isn't clumsy, but she's not a trained acrobat either. She's average, so we're just going to go ahead and leave her at a 10 for dexterity. Moving on to constitution, she is going to be way above average here, and this is largely due to her heat resistance and other dragonborn-like qualities. We see throughout the series, she likes scalding hot baths, she can hold the dragon eggs without getting burned, and survives Drogo's funeral pyre, even though it's been established as a magical one-off for her. Magical blood boost aside, we do see that she handles a remarkable amount of physical abuse throughout the series, just like she does in the show. Her dragon dreams help her get over her assaults from her brother, Khal Drogo, from things like riding all day. And we also see in the books that when the pale mare, aka dysentery, comes to Meereen, she doesn't catch it in the city and is largely unconcerned about getting sick. When others, like Sir Barristan, express concern about her catching the disease, she responds with the following. Have you ever seen a dragon with the flux? Viserys had oft claimed that Targaryens were untroubled by the pestilences that afflicted common men. And, as far as she could tell, it was true. She could remember being cold and hungry and afraid, but never sick. So, taking this into account, we're going to give her a 16 for Constitution. She's physically more durable than pretty much any of the other characters without becoming overly supernaturally so. I was going to put her at an 18 for this, but I'm not sure that it really is anything other than just being really, really resistant, but not supernaturally so. Okay, and now before anyone in the comments bites my head off about her not getting dysentery, she does experience severe diarrhea at the end of A Dance with Dragons, but this is likely due to poisoning and not disease. It is largely accepted by the readers that she misidentifies berries that she finds while starving in the Dothraki Sea and is hallucinating and slowly poisoning herself, which is also the likely cause of the miscarriage that she begins to undergo at the end of her last chapter. The whole ordeal is just incredibly sad. Okay, and now before I get too sad about baby Dany and her miscarriage and being alone in the Dothraki Sea, alright, let's move on. Shake it off. Now, next on this list is going to be intelligence and wisdom. And we see as her arc progresses throughout the story that she grows and learns from her advisors. Thanks to her education from Viserys, she is actually a very astute student when it comes to things like politics and battle strategy, as these were things that Viserys valued as a crown prince. The other areas of her education are somewhat lacking that she admits to herself, but when it comes to things that Viserys valued, she is very well educated on and is very intelligent. She knows how to use these skills to her advantage, as we can see in her plan to free Yunkai. Yes, Khaleesi, said Ricardo. Time for what? To mount our attack. Ser Jorah Mormont scowled. You told the sellswords that I wanted their answers on the morrow. I made no promises about tonight. The Stormcrows will be arguing about my offer, the Second Sons will be drunk on the wine that I gave Miro, and the Yunkai believe that they have 3 days. We will take them under the cover of this darkness. They will have scouts watching for us. And in the dark, they will see hundreds of campfires burning, said Dany, if they see anything at all. I think we should attack from 3 sides. Grey Worm, your Unsullied shall strike at them from right and left, while my Coes lead in on horse in a wedge for a thrust through the center. Slave soldiers will never stand before mounted Dothraki, she smiled. To be sure, I am only a young girl and know little of war. What do you think, my lords? I think you are Rhaegar Targaryen's sister, Ser Jorah said with a rueful half-smile. So as we can see from the above quote, she's clearly intelligent and has sharp mind for battle tactics. So we're going to give her a 14 for intelligence. Not just because she's smart, but because she allows for input from her advisors, as she notes above. Now, in the above quote, it's more a, fishing ploy for compliments about how smart she is about battle tactics, but I'm sure if either one of them had any meaningful input to give her that she would have accepted it. And talking about listening to her advisors, let's move on to wisdom. Despite constantly throwing in this facetious, I'm just a young girl bit, she is wise enough to know that she doesn't know everything, as I mentioned before when she comments on things that she doesn't know because they weren't important to Viserys, so they weren't a part of her education. And, knowing this, she's wise enough to have advisors who have more experience and skill than she does. But since she's still kind of a cocky, sarcastic teenager, she throws that I'm just a little girl line all over the place, so much so that Hizdar Zolorak comments on it during one of their conversations. And, this is pretty average for someone her age, so as far as wisdom goes, we're just going to leave her at an average 10. Alright, moving along down to our last section, charisma. And Dany is going to be pretty maxed out at that at 18. People fall in love with her everywhere she goes, and she is repeatedly called the most beautiful woman in the world by other characters. Again, she marries Khal Drogo and instantly adopts the Dothraki lifestyle and for the first time feels like she has a home. And during the, horse heart scene and living with the Dothraki in Vaes Dothrak, her brother realizes that these people love her in a way that she's so different from him that he's never going to get this kind of love. Again, because he's kind of a dick. And through a courage boost from a dragon dream, this results in Dany using the Dothraki's love for her to, quote-unquote, crown her brother. We see this same instant love and respect for Dany come through again with the Unsullied after she frees them in Astapor and asks them to follow her willingly. When she frees Yunkai, much like they did in that big dramatic show-ending scene, the people surround her and praise her and lift her up like she's, crowd surfing at a rock concert. Except she's the rock star. The people of Meereen are divided on her, but those who do love her are diehards. In the books, they're known as the Shave Pates or the Freedmen. And the Shave Pates all shave their hair in solidarity with Daenerys, showing that they are different, adopting this new lifestyle as the people of the Giscari cities in the Slaver's Bay, later called Bay of Dragons, all have these really outrageous Marie Antoinette type hairstyles. We even see Xaro Xhoan Daxos still in love with her as he tries to woo her and regain her favor, coming to visit her in Meereen to prevent war in Slaver's Bay, and he claims to do this because he loves her and does not wish her to come to harm, even after she all but upended Karth. And this is also worthy to note because a lot of the people who are book readers believe that there is evidence in the books to suggest that Xaro Xhoan Daxos is gay. So claiming that he's still in love with her and, again, makes another offer to marry her and is doing all of this out of love for her, not his own personal interests, which he does have personal vested interests in, and Dany calls him on it. The fact that this is all still even a viable option for him to make this argument shows how charismatic and drawing people in that Dany is. And her charisma is so grandiose that even those who don't like her spread wild and crazy rumors about her. Either way, she gets people's attention, and the world seems to hold its breath waiting for what she's going to do next. And speaking of charisma, let me cut in here real quick to charm you into joining our Patreon family. Our Patreon fans get several perks such as exclusive access to uncensored and unfiltered content, blooper reels, early access to our videos, and other bonuses such as access to the Geek Week Discord once you reach a higher tier of patronage. So be sure to sign up today. Our link is in the description section down below. Okay guys, let's get back to our video. Okay, now that I'm done shamelessly plugging my Patreon page, let's look at things like armor class and initiative. We've established that they're not particularly important per se, at least for Dany as of the end of A Dance with Dragons, but we're going to fill them in anyway. As a Dragonborn with no armor, her armor class is a 10, which is average, and initiative is 0, and without the HBO jetpack boost, her speed is going to be set at an average 30. Now, again, for the rest of this character sheet, we're really only going to stick to the boxes that are most relevant for character comparison. So, like in Part 1, we're going to fill in the other proficiencies and languages with things like dragon writing, High Valyrian language, and Dothraki language. We could list psychic/prophetic dreams here since she is supposed to mirror her ancestor, Daenerys the Dreamer, in some ways, so why not? Let's throw that in there. Her dragon dreams are an important part of her character and development and storyline. Now, turning to features and traits. Again, the features and traits are specifically for in-game abilities to do cool things, which is something I want to focus on as we look at Dany's character and some events that pop up throughout the course of the story. Dany, being a dragonborn sorcerer, is likely going to be of the draconic bloodline, and I really don't see any other way of going with this for her. So let's look at what we see about the draconic bloodline. Your innate magic comes from draconic magic that is mingled with your blood or that of your ancestors. Most often, sorcerers with this origin trace their descent back to a mighty sorcerer of ancient times who made a bargain with a dragon, or who might even have claimed a dragon parent. Some of these bloodlines are well established in the world, but most are obscure. Any given sorcerer could be the first of a new bloodline, as a result of a pact or some sort of exceptional circumstance. And again, the Targaryens often call themselves the blood of the dragon, and most of their magic is rooted in their house words, fire and blood. Going back to Old Valyria, all of this draconic bloodline stuff, it seems like George R.R. Martin just pulled it straight out of D&D to put into his Valyrian history. So it's likely that their dragon ancestor is one of these fire damage associated types, which, if you look at the D&D character sheets and books, are going to be the red, gold, or brass dragons. And as a draconic bloodline sorcerer starts out with the most basic ability, draconic resilience. Draconic resilience is described as follows. As magic flows through your body, it causes physical traits of your dragon ancestors to emerge. At first level, your hit point maximum increases by 1 and increases by 1 again whenever you gain a level in this class. Additionally, parts of your skin are covered by thin sheen of dragon-like scales. When you aren't wearing armor, your AC equals 13 plus your dexterity modifier. And examples of this draconic resilience ability can be seen when Dany survives the funeral pyre, her resistance to disease, and again, the numerous Targaryen miscarriages that involve physical dragon-like traits. We also see that throughout the story that Dany has some sort of psychic connection to her dragons that is supposed to mirror that of the Starks with their wolves. Now, there is a distinct difference as Dany isn't warging into her dragons. She mostly connects with Drogon, whom she selects as her mount via this psychic connection. But it is still there, and it becomes stronger as she comes into her power. And this psychic connection, as Dany levels up, would reveal itself in D&D as Draconic Presence. A Draconic Presence is described as follows. Beginning at the 18th level, you can channel the dread presence of your dragon ancestor, causing those around you to become awestruck or frightened. As an action, you can spend 5 sorcery points to draw on this power and exude an aura of awe or fear, your choice, to a distance of up to 60 feet. For 1 minute or until you lose your concentration, as if you were casting a concentration spell, Each hostile creature that starts its turn in this aura must succeed on a wisdom saving throw or be charmed if you choose awe, or frightened if you choose fear, until the aura ends. A creature that succeeds on this saving throw is immune to your aura for 24 hours. Ooh, man, no wonder Dany's so wordy with her list of titles. Just reading these draconic abilities is a mouthful. Alright, but, focus, Kidner Bean, focus. Now, in the show, this is exemplified by the numerous times that she invokes her dragon ancestors during her long-winded list of titles, right before she destroys someone, literally or figuratively. And a notable example of this is her turning on the slavers of Astapor after purchasing the Unsullied, as we saw in part 1 of this. We see another example of this again during the attack at the Fighting Pits of Meereen. Dany is in danger and channels her dragon ancestors to summon Drogon, who's been missing for weeks, to her side to help her escape. Everyone is terrified, and during the chaos that ensues by Drogon's presence, Dany is able to escape on his back. Now, the latter may be close to the paladin ability of Fine Steed, but the fact that she calls on her dragon's blood and Valyrian magic abilities in the books to bring Drogon to her is within the realm of this ability. Plus, in these two examples, she's literally using dragons to awe or frighten people with this draconic presence. In addition to her own Targaryen intimidation, the Targaryens used this skill sans dragons for almost 100 years, which further supports that this is an ability that Dany is utilizing throughout her story. She just now has the added effect of actual dragons to amplify this intimidation or awe-inspiring skill. And, like last time, I did utilize this space to go off on the appearance features tangent between books and show, so we're going to go ahead and do that again just to keep things consistent. We established last time that Dany on screen had white hair and blue eyes, got sunburn, and was short but not short enough for short jokes. In the books, Dany is described as very petite in stature, and, like her Valyrian ancestors, does not get sunburned like the other white-skinned humans in this world, though she does get tan. And she mentions this as a reason that the wine merchant in the western market of Vaes Dothrak may have mistaken her for Dothraki in A Game of Thrones. The merchant must have taken her for Dothraki, with her clothes and her oiled hair and her sun-browned skin. All of this is assumed to be tied to her quote-unquote dragon's blood, since
fire cannot kill a dragon.
She also has silver blonde hair and purple eyes in the book. These signature Valyrian features are what set her apart from ordinary mortal men. But this is just a tangent. I wanted to be thorough and not leave this out, since this is a major difference between the book and show iterations of Dany, but those videos, like I'd mentioned before, those have been done. Now, let's look at her personality traits and see how these D&D breakdowns reflect her character as she is presented in A Song of Ice and Fire. Again, I had to go with abrasiveness. When you are abrasive, you have trouble being nice in conversation. You're demanding, and although you can get what you want, you may end up hurting others. It can increase your intimidation stat, but people will find you insufferable, and it can destroy your civil discourse. And we see examples of this where she threatens Yunkai.
I have a gift for you as well. Your life.
My life?
And the lives of your wise masters, but I also want something in return. You will release every slave in Yunkai. Reject this gift, and I shall show you no mercy.
You are mad. Perhaps we'll make a slave of you as well. You swore me safe conduct.
I did. But my dragons made no promises, and you threatened their mother.
And a better quote, since we're trying to stick to the books, is going to be when just out of nowhere she just smacks the crap out of Ser Jorah. And afterwards she feels bad about it and she apologizes and claims that she, quote-unquote, has a dragon's temper. She, like the rest of her family, used this, quote-unquote, waking the dragon or dragon's temper or blood of the dragon, etc., 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 as a euphemism for domestic violence. While domestic violence and being abrasive are not mutually exclusive, these are good examples of her having this abrasive personality type. And, as we've talked about it repeatedly in both the Part 1 and Part 2 of our Daenerys breakdown, she is distinctive. And this is when someone has a physical trait that sets them apart. Again, they can have big ears, a scar, or some other characteristic that sets them apart from the others. And as you can imagine, this can be a bit of a disadvantage if your character is trying to hide or disguise themselves. However, it gives your character a bit of a reputation. If your character has a limp, they may use it to get sympathy, for example. And as we've talked about it last time, her Valyrian looks, the silver hair, purple eyes, etc., give her away instantly. She uses her Valyrian heritage and blood of the dragon to revere or intimidate others as necessary. Again, calling back to that draconic presence. It's why Drogo picks her to be his wife in the first place, to fulfill the prophecy of the stallion who mounts the world. That whole moon of my life bit isn't just a cute little nickname for her, it's tied to Dothraki prophecy, and for more information on that, check out a link to the video in the comment section down below. We also see in her presentation in the books that she's absent-minded, getting lost in her thoughts, focusing on her dragon dreams, her house with the red door. She sometimes forgets what her goals were, going home. Quaithe frequently reminds her of this during her stay in Meereen and while she gets lost in the Dothraki Sea after fleeing on Drogon's back. She also tends to daydream and fantasize about Daario later in the books. Not so much like traditional sexual fantasies, I mean she does have those, but when she's, daydreaming and fantasizing, she's thinking about what Daario would do or say or think in certain situations. Sort of being the little devil on her shoulder as opposed to where, let's say, Sir Barristan would be the angel. And, this, in the end, as she's discovered by the wandering Khalasar, detracts her focus from the fact that she should probably be concerned. As they're surrounding her, she's thinking, oh, I think Daario would find this funny. My brother hated eating horse meat, but Daario would probably just rip a hunk off and laugh. Now, moving on to her ideals, we're going to keep this simple. Her ideals, much like in the show, are for freedom and justice. She wants to get justice for her family by reclaiming the Iron Throne, and justice for those who were enslaved by the Giscari Empire. She, in turn, also values freedom, smashing the slave trade that her ancestors helped to create. She also, in valuing freedom, knows what she's giving up by being queen. She constantly thinks about the freedoms that she has to sacrifice for herself so that others can be free. Really showing that she has a deeper understanding of these ideals in the books than maybe she did on the show. And for Dany, if we had to choose a person for her to bond with, again, foregoing the obvious choice of dragons, especially in the books since she has a psychic connection to them, I would have to say it would either be Daario, Ser Jorah or Sir Barristan, or Missandei, as her relationship with these people is critical to her character development and the choices she makes throughout her life. Despite his banishment, Ser Jorah still loves her and values her and she him, and she frets about his treason and his loss. Missandei is one of her closest friends and confidants, and there is some suspicion from book readers that Missandei is a faceless man or otherwise lying about her past, which the showrunners thought of but left out as a deleted scene.
Never betray me. Never.
And she values Sir Barristan as a fatherly figure and for his ties to her brother Rhaegar. But more and more as her story progresses into A Dance with Dragons, she thinks of Daario, not just as a fanatical teenage girl with a crush, which is also part of it, but actually weighs his actual thoughts and actions, as well as imagined ones, against her own as she makes critical decisions during her stay in Meereen. And her biggest flaw is going to be her young teenage brain. She's constantly fighting herself. She just wants to go home to the house with the lemon tree and the red door. But if I look back, I am lost, which is a mantra that she repeats to herself over and over and over again throughout the books. She wants to stay and rule and fix Meereen and plant olive trees, but she also just wants to run off with Daario into the sunset and be like a 14 or 16-year-old girl or however old she's supposed to be. She wants to ensure that Slaver's Bay remains slave-free, but she wants to reclaim the Iron Throne for her family. She has so many conflicting wants and desires, which is pretty standard for someone who is supposed to be like 16 at the end of A Dance with Dragons. And even more so, she has to struggle with all of these things and knowing that there are real life and death consequences for her actions. Not just for herself, but for thousands of people. Heavy is the head that wears the crown. Well, guys, there it is. Here is what the A Song of Ice and Fire version of Daenerys Targaryen looks like spelled out on a D&D 5e sheet. And let's put that first one up so we can see how book and show Dany compare side by side. Right off the bat, the biggest changes that we can see here are her race, alignment, and personality traits. Show Dany becomes more and more focused than her lost and struggling counterpart in A Song of Ice and Fire. Book Dany is also smarter and more charismatic than the HBO rendition. The other key component that separates them, for now at least, is the Targaryen madness factor. In the show, we see that Dany succumbs to it, whereas we haven't seen this play out for Book Dany. I mean, yeah, she has a lot of dreams, and her visits from Quaithe could very well be hallucinations, but it's unlikely. Alright guys, thanks for sticking around to see how our Mother of Dragons turned out. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Again, if you like these videos, be sure to hit that like and subscribe button, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our Geek Squeak content. And stay tuned for more episodes as we examine other popular Game of Thrones characters. Alrighty, my lovelies, that's all the time I've got for today. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Mwah!